the military base on Diego Garcia was not used by the US in this attack on Iran. Greg Bagwell joins us, a former Air Marshal in the RAF and was also Deputy Commander of the RAF Air Command. Greg, good morning.
Morning.
We want to just get into some of the detail of what exactly has happened here, because we are talking about the types of aircraft used, we are talking about the munitions that were used, and we just want to understand what all of this means, really. So should we go with the aircraft first of all? What are these aeroplanes that we were talking about? What do they do? What did they do?
Yeah, so the B-2 Spirit is really the US's most advanced long-range bomber. It's capable of flying pretty much 24 hours distance. So a mission from the continental US with these is entirely possible. They are stealth bombers, so they're very difficult to detect and therefore difficult to target. Although with the state of Iran's air defences after the weeks of the Israeli attacks, pretty much any airplane is able to get through these days. But the big difference with these aircraft is they are able to carry, because they have a very large bomb bay, they are able to carry these very, very large bunker busting, what's known as the GBU-57 bomb, which is clearly what they've used in this occasion.
And how does the bunker buster, how does it work? And let's begin with how it's actually fired, if that's the correct terminology. Does a pilot press the button and these things are released? Just talk us through that. Basically,
yes. They're actually dropped rather than fired. These are effectively gravity weapons, so you have to be right over the target. So it's not dissimilar to the 1940s, and that's because the B-2 bomber is capable of getting that close. And they drop by gravity from a very great height, and they rely on gravity effectively to gather their speed. They are extremely large. I think 30,000 pounds is their actual weight. And sheer force of physics and the size of the explosive power within the weapon itself is what takes them underground.
With that in mind, how long does an operation like this take to plan? Because and to what sort of specificity of detail does an airplane, a pilot, excuse me, does he need to be told? Do they need to be told precisely when to release the bombs if they're sort of depending on gravity to do the heavy lifting, as it were?
So we won't know exactly how this took place, but it's highly likely and highly possible that these aircraft took off without knowing whether they were going to release. So they would have been heading towards Iran as a warning, or at least a pre-positioning potentially. So I think the intention of the US would have been not to send any signals, although I don't know if you were following it, but social media was alive with rumours of these aircraft taking off. They even spotted the patterns of refueling that suggested they were probably carrying a heavy load. So there were a lot of signals that that's what they could have done. Whether they didn't get permission until very late in the mission, we won't know, but that could well have happened. They could have flown all the way to Iran and been told to come back, in theory. The planning is not that complex. These three locations are well known. They would have had accurate coordinates of the relevant positions on the ground with the weak points, the areas to the bunkers, etc. And that's where they would have dropped the weapons. Right. So actually, as missions go, it's a relatively straightforward one, albeit quite a feat of endurance for the crews involved.
Yes. So the indication from all of what you're saying and from what we do know is that these aircraft took off from US soil and have returned there as well. Are we talking about a 24-hour flying time here? Is that what we're saying?
Effectively, yes. I mean, I've only been watching some of the information that's available online, and it does appear that they are heading back home. So, and which is entirely within their capability to do so. And it sort of makes sense if this is a one-off mission that America hope has achieved the aim, then there's no need to stay. And of course, they can do it again tomorrow if required. So there's no need to put them in harm's way a little bit closer to Iran. So bringing them back to continental US kind of makes sense for both the strategy and the tactics.
Yeah. Would the UK be capable of doing anything similar to this? We know that the UK was not involved, but are we talking about a sort of unique ability of the US? The RAF doesn't have sort of an equivalent.
Yeah, it's wholly unique. These weapons are only in US hands. Even Israel doesn't have anything like this. And therefore, America's probably made a decision here that Israel has only got certain capabilities and some limitations, particularly on these three sites. And the only option, therefore, was for the US to do this bit of the attack. I'm sure that's the conclusion they all came to. The UK can't do something similar. We have weapons that go deep into underground. Our Storm Shadow missile has a penetration capability, but nothing like the size of these ones. And a lot of people will be speculating and have been speculating about the use of UK aircraft to, for example, air-to-air refuel these planes, because they would have used a lot of gas to get there and back. They are not compatible with our tankers. Our tankers have a probe and drogue system. All American Air Force planes use what's known as a boom system, and therefore we cannot refuel them either. So the UK would have and did not need to play any part in this strike.
Greg, it's so helpful to just have some understanding from you of how this has happened. That is exactly what we needed. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
Greg Bagwell there, former Air Marshal and former Deputy Commander in the RAF. He was Deputy Commander of RAF Air Command as well. So then, he actually says this was relatively simple. This was relatively simple, straightforward operation, which I think is always good to hear from somebody like him to just put all of this into context for us.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting now to see in the coming hours and the coming days what Iran's response to this is, because we've seen this morning that they've launched more missiles into Israel. Israel has carried out bombing raids to try and take out those missile launchers inside Iran. But what happens next? Trump wants this to be a short, sharp shock and bring Iran to the negotiating table. Will it work? Let's speak to David Shazan, who is in Paris for The Times. Morning, David.
Good morning.
What's the sense you're getting of the European reaction this morning to events overnight?
Well, we haven't had any official statement so far from President Macron, but I have spoken to a French government official in the last few minutes, and he said that Mr. Macron has been talking to his European counterparts and to EU officials so that they can coordinate their positions. And so Mr. Macron certainly seems to share that call from the EU's foreign policy chief, a call for de-escalation and talks. And just hours before the US strikes, Mr. Macron also called for negotiations to be stepped up. And he had a phone call with his Iranian counterpart, Masoud Pezeshkian, yesterday, just hours before the US strikes, in which the Iranian president told him that Iran would launch what he called more devastating attacks on Israel if it continued its strikes on Iran. And now that may just be a threat, but French officials are concerned that the US strikes, while they're certainly important, will certainly damage Iran's nuclear program, but they're concerned that it may not destroy it, but just set it back, and could end up actually increasing Iran's determination to get nuclear weapons. And the sense I'm getting from French officials is that they're very skeptical about any notion that Iran will now just surrender, which is what President Trump appears to think could happen.
And of course, there is a concern here that Europe is somewhat being frozen out of all of this.
Well, absolutely. And President Macron seems to have been left out of the loop completely. I think it's fair to say that the German Chancellor and the other European leaders have also been frozen out. President Trump has said himself that the Iranians don't want to talk to the Europeans. He poured cold water on the talks between the British, French and German foreign ministers on Friday, saying they were irrelevant, that they would have no effect. And he said the Iranians were only actually interested in talking directly to the Americans. So, yeah, there's a very strong sense that Europe is being frozen out here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, David. Appreciate that. That is David Shazan, who is in Paris for The Times.